a wake-up call for everyone about how fragile our democracy is. So we didn't want to let this day go by without some sort of showing of we're still in this fight. A non-violent fight for our democracy, that we will show up and we will do everything we can to protect it. So we've organized a few speakers today. We're really excited to hear from them, and then we'll move on to the street to show the rest of the world what democracy looks like, or Nassau County, or Mineola. Manage expectations. So the first person speaking today, we're very lucky to have his representation in the New York State Assembly, Chuck Levine.
Rachel, thank you. To everyone involved in putting this important event together this morning on this pretty chilly morning, thanks. Thanks to Indivisible. Thanks to all the other groups, concerned citizens, everybody. We stand in a historic place that some of us may not be so terribly aware of. But where we stand now was once called the Plains of Hempstead. And this location played a critical role during our own American Revolution, because it was in these plains of Hempstead that the British troops, trying to obliterate Washington and his rebels, found a way to work their way into Brooklyn for what then became what we would call the Battle of Long Island. Some of my friends from Brooklyn call it the Battle of Brooklyn. History was made here hundreds of years ago. We're making history, thanks to you, here today by standing up to tyranny. The only kings that we need in this part of the country is Kings County. Beyond that, we don't need any kings. We have already seen the tyranny. We saw the tyranny, we saw the brutality, the primitive brutality of what occurred on January the 6th. We don't want to see that again. And I'm amused when I hear some of my political colleagues say, oh, that wasn't tyranny, that wasn't an insurrection. Well, those people were armed. They had weapons. And before I left my house this morning, I was looking at some video. Tourists do not physically climb the walls of the United States Capitol in order to break their way in.
Right.
We have a choice. We can live in a democracy, and when we live in a democracy, we accept elections. Win, lose, or draw, we accept elections. We don't put together armed groups to contest the orderly transition of power and governance. We do not. That is un-American. Everyone here today left a nice warm home to come out here on this cold day as a storm is moving in. I don't mean to be too poetic, I'm a politician. There are storms moving in. And I'm going to suggest that we remember January 6th this coming November, when we, in an orderly fashion, whether we're Democrats, Republicans, or members of no political party whatsoever, we go to the polls, we stand in line, and we vote. There are days that live in infamy, and January 6th is certainly one of them. We have seen others, September 11th, December the 7th. We left our homes today to come out into this cold weather. But what helps us today is that our blood is boiling at the prospect of what happened January 6th, and the idea that this could happen again, or the idea that an American president would be a tyrant, a dictator, a despot. We all are here today because, are we going to let that happen?
No,
no. Not on our watch.
Not on.
Thank you so much for letting me share my thoughts with you. Keep the faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck. So next up, we have a community leader. She is the president of the Port Washington Dems. She is on the steering committee of Concerned Citizens of NY3. They're the ones who got George Santos out for us, so we could even have this special election. And she recently announced her candidacy for state senate. So we need good people to run. So please welcome Kim Kaiserman.
If everybody can hear me, I won't lose this thing because I'm not used to it. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to start by thanking Rachel for organizing this rally and for inviting me to speak alongside Assemblyman Chuck Levine and Dr. Eve Priya. It is on the 3rd anniversary of January 6th. We could be focusing on the terrible things that happened that day when the President of the United States sent a violent mob to attack our democracy. But instead, we're highlighting the work that ordinary people do in defending our democracy. And that's really extraordinary. Rachel, you, and Assemblyman Levine, and Dr. Kriya, and here I see Congressman Tom Swazi. You are leaders in the fight for democracy and decency, and I thank you and I'm grateful to you for organizing this event today so that we can celebrate those values and honor the people who are fighting for them. When I think about that fight and my own small part of it, I think back to the night that Donald Trump was elected in 2016. Like many people, I went to bed when the results became clear, but I never fell asleep. I laid there tossing and turning, and I could feel my husband tossing and turning next to me. I replayed Trump's lies and his attacks on women, immigrants, people of color, Muslims, people with disabilities, the press, NATO, and our allies. I worried that he would escalate those attacks, that he would pursue a Muslim ban, that he would nominate justices who would overturn Roe versus Wade, that he would cozy up to Putin, and that he would undermine our democracy and our standing in the world. More than anything, I wondered what 4 years of Donald Trump would do to our democracy as it existed at that time. The next morning, I got up, I tried to explain to my children what had happened, and I realized I had things to do. I needed to get on with my day. So I went out and I ran errands, and my errands took me to Michael's. I went into Michael's, I bought some art supplies for my kids. I came back to my car just in time to sit and listen to Hillary Clinton's concession speech. And as I sat and listened, when she got to the part where she directed her words to the women who had put their faith in her, all the worries that had kept me awake the night before came to the surface, and I just sat in my car and cried. After she was done speaking, I became self-conscious that I was sitting there in my car crying, and I quickly looked around to see if anyone had noticed me. I looked at the car next to me. There was a woman sitting, staring straight ahead, tears pouring down her face. I didn't know her, and I never spoke to her, but I'm certain I knew what she was crying about. The story of two women sitting in the Michael's parking lot crying may not sound very uplifting, but I think back to it as a moment when I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew that we were in a lot of trouble. I knew there was a lot to worry about, and I knew there was plenty of reason for tears. But I also realized that there were millions of people who cared just as deeply as I did about our country and our democracy, and that I just needed to find some of that. I did not know that morning what my next step would be, but I knew it would involve connecting with people like the woman in the car and working together to resist authoritarianism and defend democratic values and institutions. So in the weeks after that, in my community of Port Washington, organizations, activist organizations sprung up, and this happened across the entire country. Gradually I became involved in some of those organizations, and through that, those organizations, I began to knock on countless numbers of doors, make endless numbers of calls, and write stacks of postcards, all with the goal of getting people out to vote. It's not always very exciting work, but that work has been life-changing for me because it's made me part of a community of people from different backgrounds, different viewpoints, different age groups, who are all working together in our own way to defend democracy. As we stand here together now, I know that we're still in tremendous trouble. The stakes in the next election are higher than ever. We have a lot of work to do. But I also know that the biggest mistake we can make is the mistake of falling into despair and believing that we're alone and that nobody else cares as much as we do. This rally is proof otherwise. I always remember back to the woman in the car if I ever think I'm the only one who cares. We just need to find each other, organize, and get out the vote. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Kim. Can you hear me without the board? Okay, perfect. So it is my honor to introduce another fellow activist. She's a pediatrician. She just ran a really hard and inspirational race for Suffolk County Legislature. I've never seen a candidate work harder or be more guided by civic duty and right versus wrong. Dr. Eve Kriya.
I don't know, can you guys hear me?
Sure can.
Yes.
So, just under 7 years ago, many of us here today joined millions of women from across the country, right? At the Women's March.
Yes.
Because we intuitively understood, even then, even when he hadn't been in office for 24 hours, we intuitively understood the danger that this man posed to our democracy, right? And we were just marching against the misogyny. We were marching against the fascist tendencies that this man had been displaying. We were marching against a man who popularized the phrase fake news. We were marching against a man who planted seeds of hate wherever he traveled on the campaign trail. And these are the two most powerful weapons that a fascist has in his arsenal, right?
Right.
What troubled me the most was the hate, because history has taught us where hate politicized can lead and how dangerous it can be, especially when that hate comes from the most powerful, loudest voice in the world. Right? He called Mexicans rapists. He stated the Muslim ban. He saw good people among men carrying torches and Nazi flags, shouting, "Jews will not replace us." He dehumanized immigrants, making it somehow okay to rip young children from their parents' arms. His ignorant rhetoric sent waves of hate against the Asian community. And he targeted public health officials and scientists, such that to this day, Anthony Fauci, a man in his 80s in retirement, still needs a full-time bodyguard. And maybe most concerningly, he targeted us. He targeted us with hate. He divided us as a country. He divided families. He divided friends. And we here today understand that that's just not sustainable as a country. In my heart of hearts, I truly believe that our democracy cannot survive another presidency with this man at the helm, that he poses an existential threat to our country. Right? But we fought back, right? We tried to fight back, we organized, we did things that we'd never done before, thought we would need to do before in our lives, right? We organized rallies, we wrote postcards, we attended town halls, we educated ourselves, we made phone calls. Some of us even ran for office.
Woo! Woo!
Right? I remember during his presidency, every day, the exhaustion of waking up to wondering how our democracy would be eroded that day, what constitutional norm would be shattered, what lie would be told, what misinformation would be spread, who would be attacked. It was exhausting. But this, my friends, is another powerful weapon in the arsenal of the fascists. To throw so many curveballs at people so fast that they just can't catch them all, and they just give up and sit down and stop trying. But right now, at this moment, we cannot sit down. We must stand up. We have to stand up, we have to dig deep, and we have to defend our democracy.
Yes.
Now, I understand the world is an overwhelming place right now. Many of us here are divided with the conflict in the Middle East, so much trauma and pain being experienced by everyone. We have a gun violence epidemic, right? But just 2 days ago, yet another school shooting, leaving a 6th grader dead. We have 12-year-old girls, rape victims, being forced to deliver babies. And we recorded the hottest temperatures our planet ever experienced on this planet that we are leaving our children. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. But I can tell you that none of this will matter. None of it will matter. None of these issues will matter if we don't have a democracy with which to raise our voices on these issues. Nothing will matter without a democracy.
Woo! Yes! Yes!
So we have to focus right now. We have to focus. We have to dig deep. We have to stand up. And we have to defend our democracy. It can feel like we have the weight of the world on us, on our shoulders, right? And we do in this sense, because we understand that if our democracy fails, democracies around the world will crumble. So we're doing this for our democracy. We're doing this for our future, for our children's future, but indeed we are doing this for the world, right? So we have to focus. We have to dig deep. We have to stand up. And together we have to defend our democracy, because we cannot let our democracy die on our watch.
Thank you.
So our final speaker today, we're excited to have him here because he hopefully was the only one in this group that was actually there when our Capitol was under attack. Former, but if we put in all the hard work over the next 38 days, future.
Yes! Woo! Yep. Good morning!
I'm so grateful to all of you for turning out here today. I was there on January 6th. I was one of the last people to leave the chamber. And I won't tell the whole story, but I was in the chamber watching a very important part of our nation's history when an election is certified. And suddenly, Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and the Republican leader at the time were hurried off the floor. And people were looking, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on? And Jim McGovern came up on the stage, who's the chairman of rules up on the dais and started to try and run the process again. And a Capitol Police officer came up onto the rostrum and said, ladies and gentlemen, please, we need you to look under your seats where there are gas masks, and you need to take a gas mask out. There were only about 100 people on the floor of the chamber because it was during COVID, so people were trying to, the Democrats were trying to stay spread out, and the Republicans were letting them back together. And I was up in the gallery with about another 75 people, 100 people. The next thing you know, we start hearing pounding on the doors. And then I heard pop, pop, pop. And I thought it was a gun, but it was really a carbon-fired piston that was being used to break through the glass of the door where the president walks through and they say, ladies and gentlemen, the president of the United States of America, during the State of the Union.
Yeah.
Pop, pop, pop. It was breaking through the glass. A friend of mine, so now the floor was getting evacuated. Some people were leaving from the gallery. A friend of mine, Jason Crow from Colorado, who's a former Army Ranger, called out to me from where I was sitting. So you think of like this is where the speaker would sit. I was right up to the right here. The press is sitting right behind the speaker. And to leave, I would have to go around the whole gallery. A friend of mine called out to me, he says, Swaz, he says, check the doors. Make sure the doors are locked. So I climbed, I'm holding my gas mask, I'm climbing over the chairs and checking to see that the doors behind me are locked. They were. I started going around and I would end up, because the exit point was going to be over here, started going around the chamber, climbing over chairs, climbing over the railings, and 3/4 of the way around, I heard real gunshots. And the Capitol Police radio started squealing. Shots fired, shots fired, shots fired in the Capitol. Everybody down, everybody down. There are now only about 15 of us up in the gallery. If you've seen that picture down on the floor, which was right below me, the police had barricaded the door that the president walks through, and you could see people peeking through the door. The police officers all had their guns trained. A couple members of Congress were down there as well. I made a point of looking for the people that I knew that were formerly in the military and staying with them, following their direction.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know what was going to happen. So then the doors were shut. We couldn't leave because we didn't know what was going on outside the doors. So there were only about 15 people still in the chamber at the time. Someone was praying out loud. Some people were lying on the floor. About 20 minutes later, the longest 20 minutes I've experienced in a long time, we left the gallery, and outside there were 25 of the insurrectionists on the ground, handcuffed, lying down on the floor. And we were taken down the steps and through a maze of different tunnels and things to an undisclosed location. The main thought in my mind, and I'm sure in most people's minds at the time, was we have to get back to the Capitol. We have to make sure that we vote tonight to certify the election. Because if people wake up tomorrow morning and we haven't certified the election, then they've won. They've disrupted the process. Hours and hours later, I snuck out of where I was supposed to be because I wanted to go back to the Capitol and see what was going on. I can't tell you how depressing it was to see this sacred building with broken windows and broken doors, with the tear gas canisters on the floor, offices that had been broken into. And I wanted to try and help clean up, and I was like, the old mayor and county executive in me was like, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. And I realized I was in the way, so I had to stop. And I snuck back to where my office was. I wasn't really supposed to go there, but I went back to my office with the lights out. because we didn't know what was going on. And later that night, we got called back to the Capitol, and I stayed there to the bitter end, till about 3 o'clock in the morning, when we certified the election. Vice President Pence said yesterday, can't be pro-political violence and pro-democracy. They don't go together. Keep on fighting for what we know is right, to make sure that the greatest country in the world, the beacon of hope for the rest of the world, remains that. Your work is essential in doing that. Thank you very much, everybody. Keep the faith. Thank you.